Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this last Audit and Governance Committee meeting of the calendar year, not the municipal. I'd like to welcome anybody online from the public or the press who have joined us today, and to say that the combined authority allows filming and photography at all its meetings. There are no fire drills today, so if it happens, it's for real. And I would remind members and officers that this meeting is being recorded. Okay. So item 1, apologies, absence and declarations. We've had apologies from Councillor Smith and Councillor Mike Todd Jones is representing. And we've had apologies from Councillor Gary Christie, and Councillor Hacknoaz is substituting for him. And I now have to ask if any member has a pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda that are not already disclosed in their register of interests. Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to item 2, which is the chair's announcements. Nick Bell, the Executive Director of Resources and Performance, was going to join us today online, but his lurgy is so bad he can't even manage that. So whether he's going to be watching, I don't know. But I just wanted, for those who aren't aware, he's decided to return to retirement at the end of this municipal year. I will be able to thank him properly then, but I think members will agree he's already made a huge difference to the way in which we're supported. And I'd like to welcome Rob Bridge, who's the Chief Executive, who's joining us today, and he'll pick up some of the items that Nick could not do himself. I'd like to put on record that after our previous meeting, and in line with best practice, members met privately with the external and internal auditors. A short meeting, which we do each year, just to make sure that there is nothing that we want to share with each other which hasn't come up naturally in open business. And I can be happy to say that there's nothing to report. And my last item for my announcements is to talk about the hearing panel. As you know, the hearing panel, which is a cross-party subcommittee of Audit and Governance with me as the independent chair, met on Tuesday to determine the code of conduct complaints against the mayor. The panel sought representations from the legal advisor to the panel, from the combined authorities independent person, from the independent investigator, and from the mayor's legal representative in deciding whether or not to publish the investigator's report. The options were to publish, either in full or redacted, or not to publish. After deliberation, the panel unanimously decided not to publish the investigator's report. All the other findings of the panel were also unanimous. The law and the Combined Authorities Constitution prescribe the sanctions that can be imposed on an elected member. Consequently, and in order to ensure lawful and proportionate sanctions, the panel constrained itself to the sanctions available to it. A decision notice will be published next week, and that will set out the background and context of the conduct complaints together with the panel's findings. Thank you. Okay. So now to item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meeting and the action log. And we're asked to approve the minutes if people are content with them as a record and no comments on the contents. Thank you. We're all agreed then. Thank you. We accept minutes. If we go to the action log, I think there's only one item which is not closed in one form or another, and that regards the tracking of the implementation of audit recommendations. Could somebody tell me where we stand with that?
It's included as part of the work programme at Appendix 2. We've got the recommendation tracker for members to review and provide any comments.
So now moving on to item 3, which is the improvement framework. Angela Probert, who would normally present, is away on a family matter. And Nick, as I said at the beginning, is sufficiently unwell. He can't brief us online. So Chris Bolton, with the help of the Chief Executive, will introduce the performance report. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all again. So this is an update. This is a regular update around the improvement plan. So it comes to you guys every couple of months, every time we have this committee. And it's about reviewing progress against the improvement plan and obviously the key areas of concern identified by the external auditor in his previous letter. Just before we kick off and go into a bit more detail around the individual work streams, a quick apology. There's a typo on point 2.5. The project plans and delivery RAG rating should be green and not green amber. So apologies. So that will be in the main report and also in the highlight reports, Appendix 1. Improvement plan progress. Overall, the programme is rated as green at the end of October, meaning successful delivery of the improvement plan to time, cost and quality appears to be highly likely. And that reflects the positive trends across the 5 themes that you can see in Appendix 1, the highlight points. Governance and decision making is noted as green. I won't go through the individual points. Obviously, you've had the opportunity to look at them yourselves, but I'll pull out a couple of highlighted areas. Governance training has been rolled out for officers and members. Risk registers have been reviewed. I know we have risk next item on the agenda. For procurement, that's been reg rated as green as well. The recruitment of procurement staff to support the new structure is completed, bar the contract manager post, which is being advertised this month. Documentation for procurement is all in progress. Procurement training is underway for all staff as well. Project plans and delivery. As I mentioned, this RAG rating is green, not green amber. It's been rated as green because an awful lot of the work associated with it has now been presented to the board, things like the single assurance framework, the performance management framework, the risk management framework, and they were supported. The draft single assurance framework has been submitted and been cleared by the relevant review teams in DLUC, Department for Education, Department for Transport as well. There is some amendments that needs to be changed there. We'll talk about the implementation of risk software in the next item, if that's okay. Partnership work stream is rated as green amber. Again, there you'll see that there's a number of partners we've been working with, a big long list. You'll be aware of, of all of them really. Case studies have also been pulled together or collated that demonstrate our partnership approach, what the impacts have been made as well. Confidence, culture and capacity has been rated as green. You'll see, for example, with leadership, the first development session for members has taken place on effective committee membership. Values and behaviours, the 4th staff conference took place last month, was very well attended, and there was workshops and all sorts of areas you can see there, understanding where we are now, where we're going, where we're moving forward as well. Recruitment, retention and reward. There's new recruitment and selection procedures that have been drafted and now in place. Training on said procedures are taking place this month and next. HR policies have now been approved and have been promoted sort of internally. We have like internal intranets, videos, lunchtime sessions, and so on. So from the reg ratings, you can see that the program itself would be noted as green. The Independent Improvement Board engagement continues. The Improvement Board continues to meet on a bi-monthly basis, where it receives a report from the Chief Exec on progress. Conclusion of investigations and safeguarding the staff. Chair, you mentioned that in your introductory comments, and we understand a further update will be provided. Internal audit review, particularly on the governance and decision-making theme of the improvement programme. Internal audit stated that the board can take reasonable assurance, so a positive assurance on how that work stream is working. There's been 3 actions that have been set out and owners have been identified. The owner seems to be me, so that's fortunate. 2 of the management actions are rated as low with regards to action logs and highlight reports to include whether milestones have been achieved or delayed. And the last one around sort of looking at how changes to the governance process have been fully embedded. That's rated as medium, and there'll be a number of mechanisms to have a look at those, things like formal inspections, peer reviews, audits, second line assurance, checks and reflection exercises. Engagement, going back to an earlier point around staff conferences, the last one on the 12th of October was the 4th conference held over the last year. 85 staff attended, and there was, I think there was recognition that progress is being made in the organisation, particularly against the improvement plan and delivery on the improvement plan. Just a couple of comments to finish off. So feedback from the event was positive, extremely positive. Comments include hearing and seeing positive things we've been doing internally and externally is making me feel proud to work for the Combined Authority. Compared to December 22 conference, there was a lot more energy in the room and it felt incredibly collaborative. Internal comms from senior management was more open, honest and personable. Last point, work is underway, collating said feedback to feed into the future organisational development plan for the Combined Authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Rob, do you want to say anything before I ask for comments and discussion?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris. So I won't go over the same things. I think what I'd like to add is I think the report set out and before shows significant progress and work that's been going on over a long period of time. And, it's coming up to 6 months since I joined, which seems quite astounding, actually, in many ways. But I think the team and the work of all members have really helped progress the Combined Authority. But there's always more work to do, and we need to recognise that we want to be a continuous improvement organisation and make sure, on behalf of everyone, we can do what we should be doing for the region. I think a few things to just add. There is a strong endorsement about improvement on partnerships. How we embed that and keep that going, into the future is vital. There is a bigger piece of work that has been developed around really good case studies of the good and bad elements of partnerships over the last year, which I will be presenting to the Independent Improvement Board next week. And we have our next meeting of the Independent Improvement Board next Tuesday, and I'm going to walk them through all of the elements of the best value notice and the EY letter. to make sure that we can be clear where we are and hopefully be in a position as we go into the new year to demonstrate that we are in a position where government and EY can consider how they respond to what was issued last year. And on furthermore to that, I will be formally writing to EY because I think there was previous communications between the interim chief exec and EY on progress. I haven't done one because some of those key bits of progress only concluded this week. So I'm now going to be following up with the external audit in terms of where we are, what we think is now complete, and allow EY to then consider what their view is on the value for money position that they obviously have raised before. I'm happy to join in answering the questions with Chris, and hopefully you can recognise that there has been significant progress as an authority.
Thank you. Mark, you had.
Yes, so it is really positive to see all the progress that is being made, and I think I'll just sort of echo that before saying anything else. The one specific question I did have, which was on the partnership and the RAG rating, and I'm struggling reading that. So it's green amber. If I read the RAG rationale, it's telling me what is happening, but it isn't telling me why it's not yet green, or what would need to happen, or what still needs to happen in order for it to move from green amber to green.
So, I mean, I'm hoping it will be green, and that's part of the discussion that will be had with the improvement group internally, but more importantly, with the improvement board next week. The improvement board, quite rightly, and DLUC are asking, there's one thing about saying we're doing partnership better. There's also demonstrating how we embed it as an organisation, but also I think as a system, because partnership is not just about the combined authority. It is, around our system across Cambridge and Peterborough and how everyone works together. So I am hopeful that the green amber is more about how we can really demonstrate how we're embedding it, because actually that's a long process, and you don't just suddenly become embedded in all the partnership, and we will have bumps along the way on partnership discussions, but the maturity, and that's the other bit that the improvement board, the maturity of the organization and all our partners to be able to deal with difficult things and find a common ground and move forward, I think will be the bit that hopefully by next week and into the coming weeks we can see that become green.
I think Mark and Rob have picked up what I was going to say about partnerships, because it is very much a two-way thing. And it's all very well us saying we're great at partnerships, but if our partners are not helping us out here, then we're always going to fail. So to what extent are we confident that our partners are doing everything that we would want them to do? And then the other thing, which I always ask Mark, but as Jacob is here, are you comfortable with what seems to us to be good progress being made here on the improvement board before you hear from the chief executive formally?
So thank you, Councillor Wilson. I think from my perspective, the case studies that we have pulled together have got quotes from constituent councils, different partners, the M10 chief exec group, to give a view on how we are working with them, but they are working with us as well. So I think it is getting better. I think we've had some bumps. We've had things that have been a challenge. We will always have those. We're not, and there is more work to do, I think, about that common vision and the point around the place. And when I say that, I don't mean Cambridge and Peterborough as the combined authority. I mean Cambridge and Peterborough as a whole, and how all of the constituent parts work together to that common goal that allows us to have that voice into government. So there is more work to do in that area, and that's why DLUC and the Improvement Board are just asking a few more questions. But I'm confident from certainly the conversations and the work at an officer level and at member level that we are getting there and on the right tracks.
Yeah, thank you. Jacob, well, I was going to ask, in response to that question first, put the external auditor on the spot, particularly as he's been sent into the chamber without Mark. That point about your perception of where we are, and I suppose what's hidden in that question or meant in that question is, when are we going to get past the exam?
Great, thanks, Chair. So I think it's important to set that scene that our work will follow the work of the authority. So we can't jump the gun and do our work until the authority has, and appreciate the authority's taken a lot of steps over the past X months to get to where they are now. So I'll talk more about this sort of briefly as we go into the future agenda items. Our plan is to conclude our work around the 21-22 arrangements in January next year, January 24. So we're not too far away, and we're confident now that we can sort of step up and do our work, given sort of more of the conclusions of the authority. So not ready or prepared to comment specifically on what's in front of us today, but we are reaching a point where we will be able to do so.
Thank you. Well, I mean, that's helpful. And when we get to the report, I'm sure colleagues will want to talk to you about the timelines of when you will be able to make a formal judgment, bearing in mind our next meeting is on the 12th of January. Andy, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a difficult one to talk about, but we know from our previous experience that there are some issues around risk in terms of leadership of the organisation, in terms of training, and we've already talked about that in our subcommittee, and also issues that we can't really cover. But I'm concerned about how employees come into the system who may not be appropriately qualified, and who may take on roles which may not be appropriate, and whether they're qualified. Again, I'm talking around the subject, being very careful with my words, but there's a significant issue of risk here where we know about the strategic leadership of the organisation from a member's side, and who they bring in have caused significant risk. And I don't see that reflected in the papers here. And I'm just wondering, with following on from our hearing, whether additional matters are going to be covered to make sure that we cover off those particular issues that we've had to review this week. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cole. I mean, obviously, again, I can't really go into that, so some of that detail, but I will be, as instructed by the panel, putting together, working with the other statutory officers, what we need to do to support the sort of HR elements that you're referring to. Not, I'll come to officer leadership, and I think, subject to things. Yesterday we had recruitment panels for senior directors for permanent appointments, and I'm hopeful that we will have some good news about that in the coming days and up to the board meeting, which will strengthen the organisation at a senior level and with qualified, suitable people. And I think some of the bits that Chris referred to around the culture of the organisation. So I am now focusing on the staff element, but the culture of the organization, the skill set and the way that people are working and feeling to be part of something positive and wanting to work and are working together, I think shouldn't be lost on you as a panel and a committee. And it's something that in the short period of time I've been here, I feel really pleased about, actually. And it's not a magic wand thing. It's about that you can get a feeling about an organization. And I suppose I'm fortunate, so this is my third chief exec role, and therefore I get a bit of a feeling of when you're with people and you're around an organization about how it is ticking and how people are. So I think for you as a panel, as an organization and a group of core staff, it's heading absolutely in the right way, and it's really positive. But there are things we just need to pick up, as you say, and we will do that. And I will demonstrate that to the external viewers of what we need to do to improve in the right way, because, I'm determined that we turn a corner and we move this organisation on behalf. And it's really important to stress this back to the partnership point. The combined authority isn't a separate entity to everybody else, really. I said this at a Huntingdonshire District Council meeting a few weeks ago. We are actually everybody. We are part of the system, and everybody is part of the combined authority. So it's easy to just say that over there, but actually everybody is part of it, and therefore the success of it is down to everybody, not just how we operate as one single organisation. And if we want to succeed with what I think is the opportunity for us as a combined authority for a region like other ones are in the country, it's really important that we focus on making that clear and getting that common vision and working together to get the best for Cambridge and Peterborough residents.
Thank you. Edwina, the monitoring officer, would like to say something. Edwina, please go ahead.
Good morning, committee. Good morning, Chair. I just wanted to add to what the CEO has said and to assure you as a committee. So with every appointment of an officer, including senior officers, there is a committee which consists of members, that's elected members of the CPCA, who are involved in drafting the job description, the person specification of the candidate. They're also involved in the interview process and the appointment process. And in addition to that, there's several stakeholder interviews that take place. So sometimes chief executive of the constituent authorities, other monitoring officers. So there is a wide range of people who are involved in recruiting officers to the CPCA. And that's something that's been going on at least since I've been here. I'll say since last year, sort of August 2022. So just to assure the committee and in response to Councillor Cole's comments, that the skill sets of anyone who's appointed to the CPCA is carefully considered and looked at. And in some instances, especially with statutory officers, the HR committee makes those decisions. So I just wanted to sort of put that on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Edwina. Any other? Andy?
Just briefly, thank you very much for clarifying that. I don't think I have particularly an issue with the way that the officers are employed, apart from one particular case when maybe the nature of their employment should have been rearranged to be a political one rather than not. So that was really my concern, and that is now catered for in the process, so that could never happen again. That was really the point I was making, but thank you.
Okay. Well, this reflects a tremendous body of work and over a lengthy period. I think my concern is the chief executive talked in partnership terms. These things take a long time to embed, and some of these RAG ratings are based on achieving milestones. And when we've discussed procurement policy, for instance, having the policy is a proper, appropriate policy is a great achievement. But knowing that it's being applied is much trickier. And when you think of senior leadership, particularly at the senior political level, the cultural change we know is quite a challenge. So in one sense, all these greens look good, and they are good for what they represent. But in another sense, it's not over. And how are we going to be assured in the time ahead that these long embedded things that take a long time to embed are actually happening?
I think it's very fortuitous I was here today, Chair. I think that's absolutely right. So I'm really clear with the Improvement Board, with DLUC, with external auditors. There's a set of questions, concerns raised in their communications with the authority. And a lot of that is around the basis of you need to put this in place, you need to have that in place, you need to put that in place. So absolutely my reaction and response to those parties is we've done those things that caused you to have concern. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't then focus on and say exactly what you've said, Chair. But my response is, how long is a piece of string? And, I mean that honestly, as in some of these things do take time, and it is not right, I don't believe, for those to then be held forever over the authority, because, as I said at the beginning, being a continuous improvement organisation. So just because we don't have a best value notice or a view from the external auditors doesn't mean we then say, okay, we're done, don't worry. I'm going to be keen that we continue to evolve as an organisation, learn and record our progress, be that through an improvement board, an internal improvement board. And I would expect you as an audit and governance committee, regardless of what happens in the new year, to want to receive updates on some of these key things, even if it doesn't have to be done in the same formal way as it is at the moment. And I think as an organisation, we should be doing that to make sure not just that we embed, that we change and evolve and learn, and make sure, as I come back to, that we can do what we should be doing for residents and businesses across the region.
Thank you very much. And I think we're of one mind, really. It's just that when we fold the apparatus down of improvement programs and improvement boards, we do need to to have a way of seeing that in that longer journey, because I think members will recall, or some of us around the table who were here, when we had the intervention from the external auditor, we did look at ourselves. Why did we not see this coming as an audit committee? And partly because some of the behaviours were evident, but we perhaps could have influenced things earlier if we had been thinking about it in a different way. And I think the great lesson to be learned from an audit committee perspective is, how do we get the assurances or the indicators on these issues which are often happening but not being talked about? And so I hope the committee will receive something that will take us on that journey when we pass the watershed of what's going on at the moment. Does that make sense?
So absolutely, I think it comes back to my point. I mean, whether it's the word improvement or we then have that clear development program, development board, whatever we can call it. But I think that evolving and continuous improvement is vital. It's vital internally and externally. And it comes back to the point earlier, Chair, which is the maturity of the organisation and then the maturity of the system is what will ensure that when bumps come, we will respond together in the right way. And if we can't have honest but respectful conversations at any level, so that's officer and member level, then that will make sometimes that challenging. I know there'll be spikes and there'll be issues that come up, and they have done and they will continue to. But I believe that all members and all officers want to do the best for their residents and businesses across Cambridge and Peterborough. And with a combined authority, you can see it in other parts of the country, there's a real opportunity to do much more, which will benefit everyone. And it would be, I think, inappropriate is the wrong word. It would be not me doing my role properly if I didn't push as hard as I can to make sure we keep evolving and taking that opportunity. And I think my focus at the moment is the best value notice and the EY letter. I think in the conversations over the coming weeks, what that then morphs into following any further correspondence is really where I will then be focused. And that will include how we update not just the Audit and Governance Committee. I would expect overview and scrutiny and the board wanting to receive regular updates on the progress of the organisation and the system.
Thank you very much indeed. We have one comment.
Thank you, Chair. To put it in your words, this is an innocent question. My first and possibly the only meeting, as I am substituting for somebody. What I have heard is evidently something quite important. But I'm not quite sure what it is referring to, but the phrases that I picked up, such as the senior level, senior officer level, senior political leadership level, the behavior was evident but not talked about, and then the chief executive stressing the need for honest and respectful conversation. it's a bit foggy. I'm trying to decipher this, but I can't. Would you be kind enough to, perhaps it may be in public interest, to elucidate on what these references are to, or what the actual issues are within the organization?
Edwina, did you want to comment on to that to those questions?
Sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, I can't. Okay.
We can hear you now.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you. So, in response to that question, there are some matters that are confidential and exempt, which have been the subject matter of a recent Code of Conduct hearing, and therefore exempt under the Local Government Act 1972. These were matters that fell within the remit of audit and governance and the sub committee hearing panel. And like, as the chair has said, there is a decision notice which is due to be published next week, which will contain some details of some of those issues. But I'll leave it. I'll leave it to the CEO whether there are some other matters that he wants to refer to. But with regard to some of those issues that have been mentioned today, they can't be discussed with in public meetings and are covered by the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you, Edwina.
I mean, you may want to, Chair. I mean, obviously, I think Edwina has answered, the some of the key points. What I'd add is, from a staffing point, I think the best way of referring to is that the amount of work that's been taking place to improve the culture and the way that the officer corps works, which hasn't been right in the past. That's part of some of the concerns that were raised by DLUC and by EY. So I think that, I know it feels like we may be talking in riddles, which might be what you're we're not deliberately trying to do that. I think we have to be respectful of the confidentiality that Edwina has said. But I think, that as an organisation, how we bring staff in, the process to bringing staff in, how we support staff through our HR policies, how we make sure that people are, with the performance framework, means that people understand what their roles are. We're holding and accountable to what we deliver, make sure we deliver those projects, deliver those pieces of work, make sure the culture is right so that people can feel comfortable about what they're doing, are things that are all set out through this improvement update today and previous. And referring back to the staff conference, I think, I've now attended 2 of those in the time I've been here, and we've had 4. And I think the general feeling, and I've got other staff in the room who may want to add what their views, is a real feeling of a team, and not just parts of an organization doing things, a team. And I'm really keen that as an organization, we operate as one, and we have our disciplines and professional areas, but we operate as one. And that then is about the right culture that then, from a staffing point of view, addresses many of the concerns that have been there in the past about how the organization has worked at an officer level.
Thank you. I did say, if you wanted to say anything, ask the innocent question, and I'm glad you did, really, because we've lived through this. And there are confidential aspects, but I think one's got to think of it as we were put into special, the CPCA was put into special measures in June last year when the external auditor made what was really an extraordinarily rare intervention into an organisation in local government. And some of that is, a lot of it was prompted by leadership behaviours. And all this work that's gone on since then, plus the matters which were finally deliberated upon earlier this week, have been what this is all about. But there's not. It was inappropriate, and we are a team, as the combined authority is a team, as the chief exec said. So it's invidious to try and dwell on any particular aspect. I think there was a general difficulty, and we're hopefully in the new year, the combined authority will be able to exit from special measures, because it's never good for an organisation to be under the level of scrutiny that special measures require, because you want the intellectual firepower to be made focused on the improvements of the outputs of the organisation. But mending it has been what's focused the last 6 months or more, in fact, almost a year. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Chair. It does help, but forgive me for having that feeling of listening to Sir Humphrey Appleby in the US Minister. You know, you get lost in this universe of words. But if this is a statutory or legal requirement, or if this is decided to be kept confidential within a group smaller than this group, I do respect that. However, I think in order to inspire greater public confidence, it is, in my view, advisable to let the public know and give explanations as you have just done. And I'm sure people do understand these issues, but I leave that to the organization, to the regular members and yourself, Chair. But I wonder if I may take this opportunity to ask one further question, which is on project outcomes. I'm a little bit unclear, being a town councillor as well as district councillor. The combined authority should be bridge between the local area government and all local, regional and national partners and stakeholders, providing a single unified voice and offer for the combined authority area. May I ask, what are the mechanics of this? I was quite unaware of this role of the combined authority. I mean, in the town council, we hardly hear or are aware even of the existence of combined authority. So how do the combined authority reach out to the more local areas beyond the district towards the town and parish councils?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So just stepping a little back in terms of mayoral combined authorities, I mean, this has been a government initiative in terms of having a single voice, elected representative voice that has regular dealings with government, and that's the way that they are set up. But again, working on behalf of the constituent authorities. I think from my perspective and your point around town and parishes, and one of the things I've been talking about with the team and with the mayor is how we do more to communicate as an organisation. And that's not just to town and parishes, that includes to the broader councillors in each of the districts and the county and Peterborough City, because I think there's a reliance at the moment that the work that we are doing will make it to council meetings through the decision notices or the minutes and decisions that are made, and they're presented to various council meetings. Some might have more detailed discussions, some may not. Leaders may say more as board representatives, some may not. I'm not saying there's right or wrong to that. It just depends on how a council wishes to operate. But I think there are things that the combined authority are doing on behalf or working with partners on a daily basis, and in fact to your projects, what's going on in certain places, that we need to do better at communicating. And I don't just mean putting it on our website, though that may be one way of making sure people can see things. But I think there is something that is a more regular update into communities or through towns and parish communities to people to understand. Because, I've said it before in one of the member induction processes, one of the hardest questions I got asked when I got this job was by my mother-in-law, who said, "Tell me what the combined authority does, because I don't understand it." So, I think there is a point about the added value the combined authority brings in any area where there are mayoral combined authorities, and they do, and we do, but we don't tell enough about it. So there has been a piece of work, it's referenced in here, about looking at our communications and engagement processes. We're changing how we operate in that, and that will lead to better communications out to districts and other local authorities, including then down into town and parishes, and then what more we do for residents to then see.
Thank you. Mark, you had another question.
Yeah, just a brief comment on this discussion, although I think we're straying into some more member induction issues rather than the report before us. But yeah, I think that clearly there is a role for the combined authority to do more to try and connect with those lower levels. But I actually also think there's a role for elected members as well. So I know that, I happen to be the chair of my parish council as well as the district councillor, but I know both my fellow district councillors, also the county councillor, and myself, we go to our parish council meetings, and when we report back, we also talk about not just our district and the county, but also the combined authority. So I think there's a role there for elected members as well, and not just let's leave it to the officers to.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we'll probably leave this item at this stage. We were asked to comment, which we've done, and it was useful to have the breadth of discussion. So the fresh pair of eyes has helped in that regard. And I think it's particularly valuable that the chief executive is here and able to give us these reassurances in the way that he has, because it's very important from an audit governance point of view to be able to feel the strength of the assurances that we're getting. Okay. Well, not off the blocks, because you're going to do the next one, Chris Belton. You're going to do the corporate risk register, which we are asked to comment on, and we do actually need to make a decision in all of that.
Thank you, Chair. This is our bi-monthly update around the risk register, the work that's been going on, particularly around the risk framework. We're going to have a look at how often the committee would like to review the register. We're looking at best practice and the other mayoral combined authorities. And we're going to do a quick update on the risk software that's being rolled out across the organisation, including the training. We also have Adam Lickerish on the call, and he's managed to magic up your wonderful reports that you'll see in the appendices from the register through to the heat map. And what's the last one, Adam? I've forgotten what the last one is.
So there's an oversight dashboard in there as well, Chris.
Ah, yes.
Good morning,
Thank
committee.
you. Okay, so you'll remember back last month when we were talking about the risk management framework, we talked around, in particular, looking at some of the definitions, particularly when it comes to scoring. Those definitions are a bit out of kilter with the work or the portfolio of projects that the organisation runs. So we've looked at those. We've rescored our risk register. You'll see in those tables there, both the inherent score table and the residual risk score table. Remember, inherent risk is where there's no mitigations. That's just a risk. If you do nothing, this is potentially what could happen. Residual is when the mitigations are put in. You'll see there's a really big change there. Since the September risk register or September reports, we've closed one of the risks around strategy gap. That's mainly due to the controls that have been implemented, including or this year, including the corporate plan, departmental business plans, the performance framework, the single assurance framework, and also there's the commissioning of the state of the region and shared vision pieces of work. There's one risk that's been reopened with regards to governance, value for money, given feedback received from a DLUC representative at our normal improvement plan meeting. In summary, there's 10 residual risks have reduced in schools, 1 has increased. We no longer have any red residual risks. It's no longer a bloodbath. I think that was a comment last meeting. And this improved trend is down to a really thorough review of the risks. As I mentioned, a strengthening of the controls. What we've also done is have other people look at the register. So I think I might have been a bit too strict previously. We've had different eyes, and also you have to remember that a lot of the mitigations that are in that register have now been delivered. Hence the residual scores changed. With regards to how often the risk report should come before the committee, I had a look at the frequency of reports going to the other mayoral combined authorities. You'll see the results there in the table in 2.2. It's a tie at the top of the table. There's 4 combined authorities that meet like we do bi-monthly and look at risk registers. Another 4 look quarterly, and 1 triannually. So the decision that Chair mentioned earlier on is, what do you want as a committee? How often do you want to see the register? Do you think we carry on as we do now, every meeting, or maybe we move to a quarterly review of the register? Lastly, a quick update on the risk software. You'll know, to underpin all the work we've been doing with the framework and the training earlier in the year, and we had some training with the committee as well. We've rolled out the new software. We already use it at the corporate level. They're the reports you see in Appendix 1. We're looking at the service registers now, and we've got dates in with all the service areas we mentioned there: transport, skills, business and climate. So what we want to do is the level and sort of visibility of reporting that we have at corporate level, we will now have that at service level, and we'll be expecting those reports to go to the individual committees, so transport infrastructure, and so on. So members right across the piece are looking at the most up to date, clear information. They have all the information they need with regards to the risk and any decisions. Okay, I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and if you wish, Adam's happy to talk you through the register and some of the supporting reports.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Yes, a big different approach from before. I mean, it's an evolution, but our debate last time was in regard to, there were so many high risks. How did management and the organisation recognise where the real things they had to put their attention to? And members will recall, we had a sort of deep dive on the finance side and with Rob, and I just share with you that he contacted me afterwards, after that debate, and it did prompt him to re-look at it in a way of, yes, there are the dangers if it all goes wrong. That's red. I used the example last time that somebody dies, that's jolly serious, but you ameliorate that risk, and that was the same if we run out of money, have we ameliorated the risk? So I felt that as a committee we were contributing, I think, usefully to the thinking that needed to go on. And we have the product of this review, the software, and a new way of looking at it today, I think. So we're asked to make comments. In those comments, I think it'd be helpful to have views as to whether we now feel that the way matters are being reported is more fit for purpose, and are we comfortable with it as an approach from going forward, or do we see any areas which could be further improved? I'll put the floor out.
just I guess in general, I find this, I'm feeling much more comfortable with what we have now than what we had before. I think that the reporting itself is very useful. You know, the dashboards are helpful, particularly things like the heat map to see where the issues are, and to see the impact of the mitigations and the residual risk ratings. There's still one or two there that concern me, but it feels like the process is starting to embed and become and yeah and mature. So I think so. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing.
Share Mark's comments. I'm encouraged by this. I was looking at the pie charts on page 53, where it says open and closed risks, for example. Will in future reports those closed risks simply disappear, and we'll only hear about what has happened in the last period? And then I hadn't really thought about this before, but is the risks by category split typical of other similar organizations in that financial risks make up some 50% of the authority's real risks, rather than doing things risks, whatever they might be and wherever they might come under?
Will I answer those questions?
Yeah, over to you, Adam.
Chris, I'll jump in there. Thank you for the question. So with the open and closed pie chart on the dashboard, if you will, obviously this is quite a new reporting format in terms of how I think we've had 2 iterations of this brought to the committee. So that's looking at kind of the risk landscape since we started. We can do this on a I guess a reporting period or like a reporting cycle. I guess it depends whether you find that information useful or not. It doesn't need to be there. But over the course of probably, I think July was the first iteration that you saw. So this is actually the third. Some risks have been closed. That's a combination of different factors. Obviously, Chris has mentioned the one which has closed since the September report. And also there's been a consolidation of some of these risks. So the volume of risks that you're seeing is some of them are more aggregated. So where we might have started with 3 separate risks that were all ultimately interlinked, they've been reworded and put together so the others were closed. So there's probably some work there to do in terms of that particular element of the dashboard. With regards to the risk by category, these are kind of the primary drivers to provide a bit of an overview. Now that kind of the set of categories that you use or the taxonomy might be different to others. I think based on my experience of working with other organizations in this space, the financial risk element is quite prevalent. And obviously, from when we say financial, that's a very broad category as well. So that could be a financial impact, or it could be things like viability and inflation, etc. So they are quite broad categories ultimately. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, Chris.
Thank you. It was really just to expand on what Adam was saying, really. If you look down at the risks that are categorized as financial, there's 2 factors that are playing into why there's so many of them. There is an element of, as you'd expect me to say, given I'm in finance underpins everything. So, for example, there's one on our Transforming Cities Fund grant, but obviously that's intrinsically linked into the delivery of the program that funds. So one could equally put it as a strategic risk to not deliver the projects. And so it's just a call of, is that the financial risk associated with the grant or the strategic risk associated with the delivery that the grant funds? There's also an element here where we can probably have a look at, similarly, which risk type does this really fall into? For example, cybersecurity is down there as a financial risk. And that's really there because the IT services within the combined authority are managed through myself and the exec director, who's the CFO. It's not actually a directly financial risk, but that's the rationale behind it sitting there. So there are many that are actually financial inflation. There are some where the categorization could go either way. I don't think it's accurate to say half the risks in the authority are solely sitting under the financial camp, but they're all fairly broad churches.
Before I ask other comments, thank you. I'm not sure if I got a sense that this report is designed specifically for us, or whether we are looking at the system which the combined authority is using, because our role is to be assured and satisfied that the risk management is effective and happening. It's not our role to decide which risk and where it should be. That's for others. So is this just for us, or is it used elsewhere?
Adam, I think it's back to you.
So this particular report is, or the dashboard that you see in front of you, has been put together for yourselves. That doesn't mean that it won't be used in other forums. So Chris mentioned the work that we're doing in the other areas of the organisation at a more operational level within the programs and services. They will have a similar dashboard when they receive their risk registered into the committees. So it'll be just look at the information contained within there. So if it depends whether you feel this is useful or valuable. Ultimately, you may find that just the risk register, obviously the bigger document, and the heat map, if you do not want to see this dashboard because you don't feel that it necessarily assures you, then that's fine. But this one has been put together for yourselves at this point.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adam. I just think I'd add, as Chief Exec, I want the organisation to be risk aware. So I actually find these dashboards and this data not just for the corporate management team, but how with wider parts of the organisation where they're delivering and working with our partners, having an understanding as an organisation. So actually, regardless of whether you as a committee want to see it in its current form and how it is, there'll be bits of this that I will want to make sure are shared appropriately within the organisation. So as an organisation, we really do ensure everything we do, we understand the risk, we're risk aware, and people, either as officers and then ultimately as members, make decisions that are informed, understanding the risks and the mitigations. And that again comes back to our previous conversation about us being an evolving, learning and improving organisation.
Chris, did you want to say another on this subject?
Yeah, just a brief note, just to remind the committee, when we came to you last month, it wasn't last month, was it, in September, and we were looking at the risk management framework, the definitions in there and the scores and so on, they were produced, co-designed with nominated officers from all your constituent councils. So again, there we've been actively looking at best practice, not just within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but also within the M10 group, and we've incorporated that in the design of the register that Adam's just been talking about.
Thank you, because I'm really keen that we don't just have stuff for us. We're really trying to see how the organisation functions, and I think the Chief Executive's comments are very reassuring in that regard. Did you have a point?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for me, looking at a risk register, I want to know what's high, what's rising, and what's stuck. And I think that illustrates it really well. I think whether the explanation here is sufficient to reassure me is neither here nor there. The fact is I need to make sure that you are recognising that and it's shown within the risk register. So I'm grateful for that. I was just surprised at the cybersecurity one, because it seems to me you spend some money, you talk to the right people, and then you'll fix it, and then you continue that. So it should be fairly easy to see that pathway. But to say you continue to develop the position with GCHQ is probably not as much detail as I would like to see, but maybe there's a reason why you don't want to put a huge amount of detail in there.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we don't want to put too much detail in our cybersecurity. I just would like to say we're using best practices from GCHQ. We're not directly working with GCHQ. We're not quite that profile, I don't think, as a national body.
Picking up what you and Rob were saying, I agree entirely. It's not appropriate for us to determine whether a risk score is too high or too low. But if we're not doing it, then officers definitely are doing it. But then I think that there should be some member group that also reviews that, such as the board. And is there a mechanism for either this information, such as Andy has indicated, that you'd identify the risks which are going up, going down, and staying the same, and broadly the heat map, and maybe some of the pie charts, that could go to a board meeting so that they get a good impression of what the risk is at the moment that the organization is facing before they start making decisions on the future.
I'm hopeful Chris or Rob will correct me if I'm wrong, whether we actually take this through to the board meeting, because I'm not sure in the time I've been here whether we do or we don't. I appreciate what you say, Councillor Wilson, because if you're sitting in a council, it's very likely that corporate risk registers make their way through to a cabinet or executive at some point. So maybe Chris or Rob, you can hopefully answer that bit, and then depending on who you answer, I'll then give a view about what we might want to do.
Thank you. So we look at the monthly as within sort of performance and risk. So we sit down with the ED, so Nick, to review them. They're reviewed at CMT as well. From each area, they're reviewed at every sort of committee. So you'll have like transport committees and so on. So risk should be done there, and a performance report does go to board. Now, I'm to be honest, I'm not sure we've included risk in said performance report. Might be something we think about for the next time. Probably not for this board, maybe the next board. So we do have that visibility at all levels.
So if I may, my suggestion was going to be, if we don't, then we incorporate it into our performance report, because actually it could have, you can use the more pictorial way of demonstrating where the risk is rather than every bit of detail. But that'll allow the board to have that feeling. And I would also then include, subject to your views, that there may be some sentences about what you as a audit and governance committee on behalf of the whole organisation feel around the risk awareness and any. So if there were things that you felt that the board needed to think about in your role, you suggesting what they would be to allow a more informed debate, we could incorporate. Chris is right. The papers for the board meeting at the end of November are literally in my inbox and about to be finalised to be published on Tuesday. So we won't make it for this next board, but maybe as a sort of noting point from all of you, you could put forward that you'd like to see that make its way into, as a recommendation as such, into the papers in the future, and then you can consider whether there's bits within that as a committee you would want to reference back to the board for that awareness and showing your role within this.
Core blimey. I'd always assumed that as a proper organisation, the board that was running the organisation would review the risk register. So it's a shock. So yes, I very much support what the chief executive has said, and I think the recommendations can be quite clear. I think we welcome the maturity has now been reached in devising a way of presenting risk within the organisation at the corporate level in a understandable and meaningful way. And we were unaware that the board had not asked to see the risk register hitherto, and we recommend that they should see it at least once a year and possibly more. They will need to judge.
So, Joe, I do want to. I don't think it's the case that the board's not interested. I do want to just clarify. They have been working and approving the risk management framework, and they have been involved in those conversations. And the risk management framework, of course, drives what the risk register. But that's been, again, a development piece through the last few months. So I think we're at a point where actually what you've just said is the next step of how we include it and the best way of including it, which we'll take away from here.
Okay, it's always interesting the emphasis we have on words, but I mean, we are, again, I think we're in the same place. I probably expressed it slightly too brusquely. Yes.
Thank you, John. That goes to the point about how often we see it. I would say more rather than less, and then we work out the system whereby whatever reflections we have get to the board in the most appropriate way at the most appropriate time.
So just to add to that, so I think the proposal we had was either bi-monthly or quarterly. Given currently we're meeting, I think, 6 meetings a year, we're hoping that maybe in the future we can settle that cadence down more to sort of 4 a year. I would suggest at the moment it is something that gets reported to every meeting of this committee.
We happy with this approach as we've discussed just now? Okay. Well, thank you. I know a huge amount of effort's gone to turn. I mean, in this very long journey. How long have I been doing this? Too long. 5 or so years. This is the first time I've instinctively felt comfortable with the way it's being brigaded and reviewed. And I know these things are not easy, so it's well done for that. And yes, we would like to see it at each meeting. And for those who were not with us, we had a development session recently thinking about workload and the nature of the way we do our business. And we're going to have a look at our during our last meeting of this municipal year on what our workload is, how often we need to meet, how often we're keen not to just move bureaucratic stuff from left to right, but to have a proper value both for us and for the organisation. But for now, every meeting, and it's very good to see. Are there any other comments before I close this item? You may escape. And thank you, Adam. Now, move on to external audit, which I'm just looking at item 6, and Jacob is going to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just take you through the headline messages of the report. I'll take the report as read, but happy to take any questions following running through. So if I start us off just on page 62, so it's important I think to reflect where we come from. So we issued our initial audit plan in January of this year. And since that plan, there are 2 scope changes to our audit. So the first of which is the change in materiality. Now, this is just a rounding change, I guess, down to 1.4 million as our headline materiality figure, 0.7 million as the figure that drives our work, and then 70,000 as the level of which we'll report any misstatements that we identify above that level. So I think it's important to reflect, as we did in the plan, that is a much lower level than we've had in previous years, given the extra spotlight on the authority this year. And that has driven additional work and has created challenge, I think, in the audit timeline, purely because it creates additional work for us, but also additional work for the authority and the finance team. That being said, I think it's been a smooth audit, and we have limited differences to report through this audit. So I think it just needs to be taken in the context of there has been additional work, but with that being said, and with that backdrop, it's been a relatively smooth audit and a smooth process supported by the finance team. The first impact of that is the change in group scope, which is the second scope update since our plan. In our plan, we communicated that the majority of components would be at a review scope, which is relatively high level procedures. 3 of those, given both our lower materiality level, but also the increasing activity in those bodies, have become specific scope, which creates, again, slightly additional work there. If I take you through to page 64, so I think it's important for the committee to reflect that there are no uncorrected audit differences, and the 3 audit differences we have identified have no general fund impact, and they have been agreed with management. So the first of these on the pension liability is a national issue where, due to the time of our audit procedures, the triennial review of that liability position has concluded. so the authority have required an additional report, and that showed that the net pension fund liability was understated by just over £1 million. The second of these is a classification change only between short-term cash and short-term investments, so short-term assets of the authority. There was £98 million which sat within cash, but due to the strict nature of the code in terms of how those balances should be classified on an accounting basis, they are to be treated as short-term investments. So this is not an issue with the sort of liquidity of those or any concerns around those. It is purely the code definition in IAS 7, and that also has a prior year impact where balances were classified similarly. I think it's important to reflect that this was in line with the accounting policies of the authority, but those policies were not necessarily in line with IAS 7. However, those balances were very imminently cash, so within the 3 months post balance sheet date, they became cash. So again, that's just classification in the balance sheet. And the third is again classification between income and expenditure. So there's no net impact on expenditure on net expenditure, but income and expenditure are both equally overstated by 0.672 million. We've also reflected some disclosure points around exit packages, and I think this was again accounts production rather than a wider issue or anything too concerning. So just a few corrected differences, which management will be correcting in the final accounts once they are published. If I take you to page 67, so we just wanted to bring to the committee's attention 2 control observations. Now, I don't think either of these are necessarily new, and neither of which have given rise to any issues or errors, but I think just important to reflect. So each year, CIPFA publish a disclosure checklist, which an authority can use as a checklist to make sure they're complying with the code. The authority hadn't completed this. This is work that we have subsequently completed, found no issues with, but I think it's just important to reflect on that. And then the authority also doesn't have a formal procedure in place for the authorization of manual journals before they're posted. So again, we haven't identified any issues with our journal testing, but I think it's just important to reflect on that as well. So a large part of the report is then just providing extra detail on those procedures. So I won't go into too much detail on there, but if I take you to page 87, which is the value for money section, so there's no significant updates on value for money as we've discussed already. The section here is effectively what was in our audit plan anyway, so nothing new in this section, but thought that was important to raise. And then if I just take you through to page 103, which is the outstanding work. So we will provide an update on all of these matters in writing to the January committee, but just to give an update to the committee as to where we are with these procedures. So the officer's remuneration and pension scheme liabilities work is in our review processes, and no new issues there. Value for money, as it says in the report, we were awaiting the conclusion of multiple internal reviews to continue our procedures. So now we're in the process of continuing our procedures. Now some of those internal reviews have concluded. In terms of the investments line, so we have received that outstanding confirmation. There were no issues there. We do have some procedures outstanding in respect of the value of investments and some of the technical accounting of valuing some of the group investments, but again, no new issues to flag. In terms of the group accounts, it's in a similar position. We are still awaiting further information from the component auditor at some of those bodies, and then some of the technical adjustments of eliminating intercompany balances as well. In terms of unrecorded liabilities, I think we've got 2 final items we are just looking at and reviewing just to conclude on that. And again, we'll provide a full update to the January committee. And in terms of related party transactions, again, this is now in our review processes. So we have made some progress since issuing this report. The final 5 items are ongoing requirements until the point of signing. So they will likely still be there in a January report and would be sort of until the day that we sign. So nothing really to say on those ones. So that's sort of the quick run through and the high level messages of what's been a challenging audit given the materiality figure and some of the extra procedures that's driven, but an audit that's been well supported by the finance team and has gone relatively smoothly with limited adjustments and no uncorrected differences at the end of the day. So happy to take any questions or comments.
It's sadly not a question. It was just to express from our side that we also see the audit as having gone very smoothly, and to thank EY for the audit team's support on that. And we were obviously very pleased when we got this report through to see that there's relatively little of note given the significantly lower thresholds and enhanced scrutiny quite understandably applied this year. Both the advisory notes that EY have provided in terms of the approval of journals and the SIPA checklist we're going to be taking on and putting those controls in place. And the only other one I wanted to mention was just a brief explanation of the exit packages adjustment, which was simply that some of the exit packages fell between financial years, and we had a discussion with EY about the appropriate year in which to include them. So should they be shown in 21-22 accounts or 22-23s? And unfortunately, when that was concluded, a table which summarized those that had that question over them was sent. That table was put in rather than being added to the existing table of those that were definitely in 21-22. So it was an unfortunate human error, nothing more.
Thank you, Jacob, for that positive analysis on the financials side, and for the comments from the Chief Finance Officer. Before I put it open to comments, could I just clarify? We have a meeting in January on the 12th of January. On page 63, it states that the VFM conclusion will be by the end of January. What is our expectation for our January meeting? Will we be able to have an opinion?
Thank you, Chair. So we are still working through our timeline. It's important, I guess, to reflect that we are still waiting on some information from the authority, and we haven't seen the full details of all reports. So assuming we get that information in a timely manner, we would like to come to January with a sort of full update as to position and be sort of ready and close to signing the opinion off as part of that. But we do need to see that information, see if that requires any further work, and get that in a timely manner as well.
Okay, well, I would encourage everybody involved to aim for that target date, because our subsequent meeting is March, and I think I don't think it's beneficial to the organisation to have this matter open for that long. So anything that we can do or can be done to clarify the external auditor's opinion by our next meeting would be valuable. Any comments on the report?
Thank you. It's just a small point of clarity about the exit payments, that there were some that were double counted. Is this what you're saying?
No, sorry. It was so going back to a bit of accountancy, the accounts are prepared on an accruals basis. So you recognise transactions in the year in which they relate to, not necessarily the year in which they're paid. So if I ordered a table in March but paid for it in April, I should show that in the March accounts. So there was a question around whether an exit package that was finally agreed in, say, the summer of 2022 should be included in the 21-22 accounts or the 22-23 accounts. And so it was making sure we didn't double count or indeed omit any of those, and making sure we used that treatment correctly was the discussion with EY. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you. I suppose to get a grip on the money involved and how many there were, because I don't think it's clear exactly how many there were and how much that was. Do you have that figure and that number to hand?
Not to hand, but I can certainly circulate it. We've got the updated set that will go in the accounts coming to the committee in January that include both sets.
I mean, it depends on other questions. I think what I was going to say is, I think actually everything we've talked about this morning, I think this is a really pretty positive external audit report. And for people who don't know, my background was the finance director for 9 years at Fenland District Council, and so I've had plenty of experience of external audit reports. So I think it shouldn't be lost how progressive finance and organisation has come, and I thank EY again. And I'll come back to the point just on best value, sorry, on the value for money. This is back to some of the correspondence that I will be having with the external auditors as well, because that is around that. And let's remember, the best value notice and deluxe view will be very much understanding what the external auditor's view will be on value for money, which I'm hopeful will be good and positive, but they are crucial to the conversation we had at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you. Now, other comments from colleagues? Okay, thank you. I've just got one last one then. On page 106 is the, and I've lost sight of this before, the management representation letter. And this always gives me the uncomfortable feeling as I see that my signature is required. I'm not sure I'm able to. I always am very nervous of a non-executive organisation providing executive confirmation. Is that a fossil, or have I missed something?
So that is a requirement of the management representation letter. So that is correct. Yeah.
I've had many a conversation about the letter of representation, and dare I say, I always say it's the get out of jail free card in terms of the external auditors, because really what it does is put the emphasis back on the finance team and you as a committee that actually we've told the auditors everything. So I understand, Chair, why you would raise that question, but if we don't sign that, you won't get an opinion from the auditors. I think it's probably the fairest point. So I think what we always need to do, and we will be, is be transparent and open and recognise what the regulations and what we must do.
No, I wasn't suggesting we didn't need the letter. I was just wondering how I could convince myself on all of this management stuff, which I have no responsibility for.
So that will be through Nick Bell and Rob Emery, and probably Edwina as well. I think that it's around the statutory roles of finance and governance to have a conversation with you and update you as a committee to make sure you are happy to put your signature to it.
Okay, I look forward to that before Christmas. No other comments. I think yes, I echo the positiveness of all of this, and cannot emphasise enough the need to get a opinion for our next meeting, if at all possible. Thank you. Item 7, the Treasury Management Strategies Mid-Year Update.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware this is your favourite report of the year, but you'll be happy to know that my introduction will be quite short. This sets out 1/3 of the annual cycle. You get the strategies themselves at your next meeting in January to review ahead of the CA board. You then get an outturn report and this mid-year on. The reason it's relatively brief this cycle, is because the primary purpose is to give you the assurance you need that we are handling the organisation's cash well. A significant number of the performance indicators in this report relate to debt, and we don't have any, which always makes that part nice and brief. We continue not to have any, and there's none currently planned to be taken on. The other side of that is we report by exception on performance indicators related to how we're managing the cash balances we do have, the loans we're giving out, and everything has been in order over the last 7 months of the year. So there's actually no exception to report. What I would like to take a slight amount of time to mention, because it's quite material to the organisation at large, is due to that focus on regularity and appropriate use, there's nothing in the indicators that actually explicitly says how the portfolio is doing. So we've included Appendix 2 to give the committee a flavour of that, because it's changed hugely. This time, I think 18 months ago, the discussion was we're worried about rates going negative and how do we hedge against that. That has flipped. Everyone will be aware there's very high levels of inflation, both nationally and internationally. That's reflected in our income from these treasury management loans. The first table shows that the average rate's gone up by 1%, which is a 25% increase. In numbers terms, that means the September CA board were told that they've got £6.8 million of income, of which only 800,000 was actually planned for at the beginning of the year. The CA board have been made aware of this regularly, been updated on those forecasts, and has been given options through discussions with officers and members to ensure that they have options available to use this windfall to best achieve our strategic outcomes, while always being steered very clearly and very understandingly that this is a one-off. While those rates are expected to come down slightly from where they are now, the medium term we're expecting around 4%. That is going to be built into the medium term financial plan that's going in draft form in November. But this 1 year big lump of interest is very much a one-off, and the options the CA board have been considering and approving match that. They're not making multi-year service commitments against a windfall. So just wanted to give the committee a flavour of what we're achieving with this and what we are doing with that surplus. And it's certainly helping us deliver a lot more than we were anticipating. But in terms of the regulatory side, it really is very little to report, I'm happy to say.
Thank you, Rob. So our role is this morning is to review and note the report. Are there any comments?
This may not be strictly relevant to this, but or it may be. May I ask a question, Chair? There was an increase of £12 on the council tax element. There was supposedly the mayoral supplement. I don't know what the actual situation is, but is it true that that is going to increase to £38 this year? Now, given that what I've just heard, there is a surplus, would that be necessary, and why that, if it's 12 into 38, I don't know, roughly 200% increase? Just wondering, why would that be necessary? What would it be used for?
That's sort of on the margin of our role, which is about how things are done rather than why they're done. But the chief executive is with us and is happy to give you a response.
Well, I plead being new and ignorant. Thank you.
I'm probably not going to give the answer that people are hoping for. So I can't actually comment on what the proposals could or could not be for the mayoral precept in future years. The draft budget, which will include any such recommendations, will be published at the early part of next week, ready for the board on the 29th of November to then commence a consultation with the public and with all constituent councils and partners around the whole budget, and that will potentially include whatever the proposals are around the mayoral precept. And if there are any proposals in there around the current situation or anything different, it will be explained in that report to what those proposals are about. And it isn't necessarily linked directly to the Treasury management point that Rob has outlined.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, it's just a question, really. When you're in a rising interest rate place, that's great because you're making money, but now we're in a falling rate. How's that going to influence the way that Treasury management is handled going forward? Because clearly the strategy is going to have to change.
So the combined authorities treasury strategy, as with any local authority, is predominantly around safety and liquidity of the money. As part of that, we have an average security of our counterparties that we have to maintain the whole portfolio over. In terms of as the rates fall off, when I say fall, we're expecting them to peak for our portfolio at about 5%, and the medium term forecast is 4%. So they're not expected to fall far. So actually the current spread of the portfolio isn't anticipated to significantly change. We'd look, and we are doing, to move more of the funding from very short-term deposits with government into longer-term deals, predominantly with local authorities because they're low risk, to lock in some of those rates over the longer term, whereas during this increasing rate, we've been moving more and more to short-term rates to capture that increasing market. So type of counterparty unlikely to change, but length of term, we're starting to spread that out to try and secure the current high rates for as long as possible.
Okay, well, I've just got one last one. Yes, you're quite right. I always take a deep breath when I read this stuff. But you didn't mention, nobody's mentioned, that there was a partial assurance for Treasury management, which features in internal audit when we get there. Would you like to comment on that now? The bit I've got here is there were policies for Treasury management, but there was no way of educating the staff on how it should be managed.
Happy to comment on that now. I was going to counter it in the next item, but happy whenever. I think the key thing to understand is the risk identified by RSM is around, do officers know what they're doing? And because we're such a small organisation, there are only 2 officers that are involved and empowered to do the day-to-day treasury management activities as it currently stands, which is myself and the senior technical accountant, both of whom write the treasury management strategy. So there's very little actual risk as it stands today, and that's shown by the fact that that audit didn't find any occurrences of either poorly recorded or incorrect transactions. What the auditors have identified as entirely reasonable is, in going forwards, as we slightly expand to address the risks highlighted through other reports and indeed other parts of that report, to have more people in that side of the finance team, we need those procedures and processes in place, because operation of that is going to spread from those with a very detailed understanding to those with a less secure footing on it, and they'll need that security of the process notes and procedures to ensure that they are doing things in the right way due to the lack of that understanding. So I think there's very little risk as it stands, highlighted through the lack of findings, but we will be taking that finding on to address and prevent risk in the future.
Thanks, Phil.
So I was waiting to the next report to ask that question. I think I understand today that the risk is small, but I guess the issue is, if it is just down to 2 people, if you fell under a bus tomorrow, maybe that's a discussion for the mayoral precept, but and the risk register. But if something like that happened, I think that to me that is the risk that we need to be, for the organisation, I guess, to be robust, is to have more people, so that if something untoward does happen, we're not just relying on 1 or 2 experts that we lose.
I think that's entirely fair, and it's something that JP as chair has brought up previously, because the second finding in that internal audit report is around our bank reconciliations, and the period in question, because this is from the prior year's audit plan, was when that senior technical accountant was unfortunately absent very suddenly with illness. And I will just say, while I'm talking about it, that we did do manual updates of management reports during that time to account for the material transactions, but the actual formal bank rec is what wasn't done, and is a perfectly reasonable finding. We are expanding that element of the team to prevent that being such a high risk in the future, and appreciate your support in that.
Okay, thank you. The reason I raised it now was to simplify when we get to internal audit, but we were doing treasury management strategy. And the reason I did it, the person I very first worked for all those years ago gave me 2 guiding principles, and one of them was get your apologies in first. So you might have mentioned it in your paper. Are there any other comments? No. Thanks very much, Rob. Now we move on to internal audit progress report, and we have Dan Harris, head of internal audit, with us. We have his report, and for you to introduce, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can take you to page 122, that really just sort of summarises what I'm saying within the progress report. So we've got the one final report that you've just touched upon there, the core controls framework review, sort of 2-pronged coverage. one element, treasury management, one accounts payable. You had seen the headline findings from that, I think, back in June meeting when we brought the annual report, but nonetheless, obviously, those findings were provisional and draft at that stage. So that's been finalised. The governance improvement plan review has also been finalised, and you can then see in Appendix A, the table, we've also issued 2 further reports in draft. To be fair to officers, those were only just issued prior to the paper deadline, so hence we hadn't got through the process of discussing those drafts. They will come through to your January meeting. Another key focus of this committee over the last sort of 12 months is making sure that we do complete our plan in enough time to sort of keep the committee sighted on the year-end opinion. So again, I would just point you to the table on 126 and 127, which shows 2 further reviews starting next week, 2 audits starting in December, and then we've only got 2 reviews commencing in Q4. And I think the committee will perhaps note that that is a vast difference from previous years where actually we've had a lot of audits pushed back to Q4. So we've got a lot better timeline in terms of delivery of our work. And I should be able to come through both in terms of informing statutory officers, but also the committee in good time in terms of where my opinion will be landing in terms of 23-24, which, as I say, has been a key focus of the committee. I don't think I can say any more at this stage in terms of that opinion, but we've clearly covered the some of the issues that were raised in the 22-23 final report. I wonder whether it's just worth touching on the improvement plan. I mean, to be fair, Chris did sort of reference the finding here. I think what I would just say is clearly this looked at one of the work streams, but nonetheless, what it probably is the first sort of independent piece of assurance that's coming through to the committee saying that we felt that all of the actions that had been that needed to be captured within the improvement plan, whether it was from the original governance review, EY's concerns, DLUT's concerns, some further comments that came back through EY and DLUT, that they had all been included and encapsulated within this improvement plan. And we could see that there was a sort of a rigorous reporting governance process for improvement against that plan to be regularly reported, opportunity for sort of scrutiny, challenge, and so on. We touched earlier on in the meeting on the one medium priority action there around obviously ensuring that there are ways to measure how embedded those actions are within the improvement plan. So progress going in line with where it needs to be, Chair, in terms of this year's plan. 22-23 plan now completely finalised, all reviewed. That was obviously the last remaining review. So I think we're in good shape in terms of where we are with the programme. Clearly, we need to still deliver those reviews and report them back through to officers and this committee.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for raising the point about the timing of the opinion, because I've talked to internal audit that when we put our annual audit governance report to the board, we will have finalised that report, agree that report, the last meeting in this municipal year. It's not necessarily likely that we'll have the opinion. We haven't in previous years, but I've asked Dan, and he's clearly focused on it. Thank you very much. That we should have a pretty good view, because I think in our report this year will, as it was last year, will be particularly relevant given the circumstances in which the combined authority has been reaching its improvement levels. Are there any questions from internal audit?
Can I just pick up on what you were saying about our annual report, and what you and Rob were saying earlier about continuous improvement? Is that something which we could both include within our annual report, that we would support the chief executive in ensuring that not only is the improvement plan completed to meet the requirements of EY and DLUC, but that the officers then work in the future on continuous improvement? And there may well be a role here for internal audit to pick up individual elements, of that, to review how progress is getting on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And the person who has the task of drafting the first attempt has now noted that on my right. Are any other comments? Want to say anything else, Dan?
No, Chair, that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's very encouraging to see the increase in timing tempo for your work, because it does make a big difference to have it as contemporary as possible. Okay, we now move to the next item, which is the whistleblowing policy, which is item 9, which the monitoring officer, Edwina, is going to introduce online. Edwina, do you want to introduce your paper?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The paper before you has come about because this committee wanted to consider and make comments on the whistleblowing policy and any lessons learned. So if I just go to the policy itself, there are a few changes that have been made to the policy recently. So the first thing to note is that there haven't been any whistleblowing complaints in the last 12 months. The last whistleblowing complaint was made in 2021. The subject of that whistleblowing complaint was then incorporated into a member code of conduct investigation, which, as we alluded to earlier at the meeting, was subject to a decision of the hearing panel. The main changes made to the whistleblowing policy can be found in paragraph 3.3 of the covering report to this committee. Those changes were made in line with best practice, also from lessons learned. I would not bore you with everything that's been changed, but it is then the report. But I think the main things that I would just sort of want to highlight is with the new policy, it's been strengthened. The monitoring officer is heavily involved. There's going to be a register of complaints, and excuse me, and the CPCA has learned lessons from what's previously happened. Most importantly, the whistleblower's identity will always remain confidential unless the whistleblower wants to make it public. The reason for this is to encourage members of staff to whistleblow. People would usually or may not want to whistleblow if they felt that their details would be out there in the public. So that's one of the things that we have incorporated in there. Also, just to draw attention, if in the cover report, I have confirmed that the new whistleblowing policy has been whittled down from 11 pages to 7 pages. It's not because it's been watered down, it's actually to strengthen it and to allow a broader range of complaints to be made. In the previous policy, we felt was quite prescriptive, and people may feel that if their complaint didn't fit neatly into the circumstances that were listed, then they can't make that complaint. But those have been removed, so it's broader, it's sort of wider, and people then can at least approach the manager or myself or HR assistant director HR, or even any of the senior officers to make a complaint. Thank you, Chair. Unless there are any questions, I will leave it there.
Thank you, Edwina. Colleagues?
Chair, thank you. Edwina, thank you for the report. I think it's really quite clear about how it works, and I think we are in a position where we should accept it and go forward. I think it's a very practical solution to what is a difficult problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other? I wouldn't be worried about going from 10 to 7. I think actually less is more in these occasions to make the language understandable and the safeguards you've incorporated from the lessons learned. But having the policy is one thing. To what? How is the combined authority getting the message across that this is an organisation that welcomes this, rather when one reads so much around about how whistleblowing can blow your hand off if you read some of the tabloids in other parts of the country. I don't know whether the chief exec could show any light on how we're going to get into the minds of the team.
So I don't know if Edwina wants to talk about how we're going to roll it out first, and then I'm happy to talk about sort of my approach with the organisation.
If you would, Edwina.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the things that we've done is we are now providing training on whistleblowing to all staff as part of the induction. How to handle whistleblowing is now covered in management induction and general staff induction. And there is a link to the policy, which is signposted on the HR hub of the CPCA. So everyone now knows where the policy is. When you join the CPCA, there is an induction. There is also, as part of employee benefits, a telephone number that officers can ring to have confidential discussions, to sort of ask questions before they do decide to whistleblow. So that's what we've been doing. So it's quite clear to all staff, anyone who joins, we've got this policy, this is how it works, you will be protected. These are the people to contact if you have any issues. So that's been ongoing for a while. And the HR team have been having regular what we call sort of lunch and learn sessions, which include different topics, and one of this is whistleblowing. So yes, that's what the CPC has been doing. Thank you, Chair.
So thank you, Edwina. And I mean, from my perspective, this comes back to the culture of an organisation and how staff feel within that organisation. And I want to have a culture that is no blame, walk towards problems, sort the issues out, work together, have open communication and honesty, which hopefully means that actually whistleblowing is a last resort, because actually a lot of issues are dealt with much earlier on than feeling that someone is in a position that they have to use whistleblowing. But what is important is that they know it's there and it's done in the right way and the policy there. I think we have weekly all team briefings, and I think subject to the sign off of all this, that'll be something that we will share with colleagues through that and in a open and supportive manner. I think there's things we can do in our office environment. I can remember having posters up in Finland actually called Squeaky Clean, and about signposting where people could go to if they needed to. So I think there's things we can do to really make sure people know what they can access, the support, and that's more than just whistleblowing. That's just the overarching good employer that we want to be and how we support staff. So we will make sure that all staff are aware of what they can do if they need to, but also I think prior to that, all of the other avenues that they have to help support them if they have any concerns of any kind.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that the report is really for noting. So it's been approved by the HR committee. I thought just to clarify that, but obviously any comments from this committee will be noted and then maybe taken back to HR committee. So yes, just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Edwina. Are there any other?
Just a very brief comment, and actually it isn't on the policy because I think I understand how this has come about, and good to see how it's been and I think we've heard some of the things that have been happening are planned, but I think the idea of that was just mentioned by the chief executive with looking at making that much more visible, I think is also important. It's one thing is the induction that and staff members may forget about that or wonder how important that is. But I think there's things you can do to make the whole process visible in the organisation that reassures people that this is something that they can make use of if they feel to. But obviously, we hope that isn't necessary.
Okay. Well, thank you, thank you, Edwina, for the. Sorry, there's another. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got some experience with this in terms of being a representative for the shop steward for trade unions, and often one of the issues that can come across. I don't think there's a problem with this report in that respect. Is in terms of that hierarchy and the line management process, is where there's an issue with the direct line management and making sure that there's a route that bypasses that to the next stage in terms of that hierarchy, so that someone has got the confidence, the whistleblower has got the confidence. If it's a problem related to the direct line management, they know the route to kind of bypass that and go further up the line, if you like. So that's always one thing that's come to mind sometimes when I've had experience of dealing with issues in trade union.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And in my view, which I say to staff all the time, I may have said in some member areas as well, I don't really get very hung up about hierarchies, job titles, and things like that in an organisation. I'm interested in what people do, and everyone through the whole organisation is equally important as everybody else. And that then plays into the point you've raised, which is the confidence people have that if actually they've got a concern, they can go to whoever they need to go to. And if it's about a concern with their line manager, that they have the confidence that they can go to HR, because that would always be the signpost that people would have in terms of, confidentiality and concerns they need to raise, but wider that as an organization, our culture is matrix and people can talk to and have confidence in talking to people. But in doing that, they need to have confidence in the culture and the trust within the organization about how that manages. So there's probably more about embedding that and the cultural work, but I totally agree. And I want us to be a place where, and equally, I work on a basis as chief exec that my door is open, and it's much easier here with 100 and whatever staff compared to 3,500 when I used to make that promise in Northamptonshire. But I make sure that I am accessible to any member of staff to talk about any concerns they have, because I want people to be proud and happy in the workplace, because then they'll do everything that you all want them to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's very, very pleasing to know that this organisation has such measures in place. You may recall there used to be a phrase, it may still be around, bringing your whole self to work, meaning that the person feels cognitively, emotionally, socially secure and relaxed in coming to work, and therefore being able to do the best that the person could do. So I would happily endorse this. There is a point, if I may pick up on, which is in the penultimate paragraph, the last sentence. Whistleblowers' identity will, however, always remain confidential if known. If known, does that mean that there could be unknown complaints as well? from, anybody could just pick up a phone or write a letter or something, in which case may this not swing the other way, to the wrong way? So what I'm saying is there a mechanism, what sort of filter is there in place to ensure that these complaints are genuine and not made for the wrong reasons? There must be a filter in place, I'm sure.
Rina, would you like to answer that about an
Yeah.
anonymous whistleblower?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, that there has to be a balance between the ability of anyone to make a whistleblowing complaint and also the ability to sift through complaints. So the starting point is you can make, or anyone can make, an anonymous complaint. However, it doesn't stop there. There is an investigation that occurs to ensure that that complaint is genuine. And if it is not, then obviously it is dealt with and a decision is made that the complaint is not genuine. This is one of the reasons why, as an authority, it is imperative that subject matter of complaints are kept confidential. Because if there is a complaint or a whistleblowing complaint that's not genuine, and for example, a senior officer or even a member is exposed, then if that complaint turns out not to be correct, unfortunately, that person's been marked, and that sort of remains like the mark of Cain on that person. So there is a process. Yes, you could make an anonymous complaint, but that's not the end of the matter. And this is why these improvements have been made. There are other people who are part of the process. The MO is part of the process. Senior managers are part of the process. There are checks and balances along the way to ensure that the final decision is fair and justice is served, if I can use those words. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I think in noting the report, I mean, we welcome the improvements that have been made and from lessons learnt, and that the training and induction that's been put in place, and we support the chief executive's intention to make these arrangements more visible, with the aim of promoting confidence among staff that they can rely on this process within the organisation should it unfortunately be necessary. We did have a development session between meetings regarding workload and the number of annual meetings that we should, or meetings we should have in a year, not the annual meeting, but the number of meetings in the year. And so there's a certain interesting irony here that this meeting is the shortest I can remember for some months. And we will, but if we look at our workload, which the presentation of it is much improved over the year, over the months, to sort out the painting the fourth bridge type stuff we have to do, and the event driven activity. Just bring us to our next meeting. There are a couple of items just to draw your attention to that. We will be adding an item on the constitutional item, which will be the lessons learnt from the hearing panel that we've just had, because one of the recommendations is to check that the Constitution holds good given our experience, or to propose improvements to the board. So that'll be another item. And then we will have this paper that comes out of the development session on our work and our approach to our work. So that's for the next month. And I now note, which I hadn't, I apologize for not having realized earlier, that we do have a reserve date in the 9th of February. This is before I hold it out to the floor. In the diary, and it occurred to me that we should keep that date until we have clarity from the external auditors, because rather than if the 12th of January eludes an opinion, we could use the 9th of February just for that one item. And if colleagues are comfortable with that, I'll leave it with officers to decide and to let us know about the 9th of February in good time. So that was don't normally have a preamble on this stuff, but it was quite a bit I felt I should just mention as introduction. Does anybody have any comments?
I think my only issue was it's a very difficult subject to cover, particularly if we're forced to go into exempt session. I'm just wondering how we're going to handle that for that particular matter. I'm sorry, I'm talking about the lessons learned following on from the confidential meeting that.
This is about process, not about any insights as to. No, it's
okay.
It just is the Constitution and the way it is gives the process. Are there any lessons for the wording in the Constitution? It's not about, if I'd implied that we'll be discussing the event, no, certainly not.
I was just looking at what I've got in my diary for the 9th of February, and at the moment it says the CPCA A&G development session. So I don't know whether that is still planned, but either way, we can keep it as either development or reserve date for this, or both.
I was reading off the paper. Yeah, okay. You wanted.
Just a minor point, and it's a clear oversight. The January committee is also expecting to get the accounts alongside the opinion of the auditors on those accounts. So apologies to my colleague for not flagging that earlier, but you should expect both.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, the next meeting is the 12th of January. Between now and then it's mince pie time. So I do wish everybody a festive season when we reach that stage. Thank you.